What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense. A couple of old friends who grew up together in Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. This is our chance to get together to share our thoughts on politics, sports, the world of entertainment. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. Brian Johnson is in suburban Washington, D.C. What's up, buddy?
What's up, dude? I missed you last week.
Did we not do a show last week?
We didn't. You had your whole family in town.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I
Oh, that's
forgot.
right. These people that raised me and fed me and clothed me came out to visit me on a 5-hour flight despite their old age.
Hey, life comes at you, life comes at you fast. We keep
It
going.
does.
Anyway, this
You
is
keep moving.
episode 4, I think, of the
Yeah.
Everybody Settle Down reboot. So, or take no offense. There I go. I only have two
Wow.
podcasts and I
See, I'm
can't keep the
not
names
supposed to
straight.
take offense, but I'm taking a little offense. I got to be honest with you.
So this is called Take No Offense. My other podcast slash YouTube show is called Everybody Settle Down, which I do with a friend of mine named Charlie Marlowe. So check that one out as well. But task at hand, Brian. Let's start with the big news of the day as we're recording this on Wednesday night, May 29th. The jury has finished its first day of deliberations in the Donald Trump hush money trial, where he faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. The jury is going to come back tomorrow and have some testimony read to them on, I believe, 4 separate parts of testimony. They also want to get some clarification on the jury instructions. So who knows when we will have a verdict, but it appears it will be fairly soon. What is your prediction of the verdict? Does it matter? Are you interested? Should we care?
I'm going to start at the end. I
Yes.
do care because it's a unique moment in American history. So for that fact alone, I do care about the trial in general. Do I think it matters? Now I'm kind of going in reverse here. I don't think so, because even if he's found guilty on any or all of the counts, it's extremely unlikely that he's going to serve any amount of jail time. Not that that's the end all be all. I mean, being a convicted felon would certainly be something. But I don't think it matters in terms of like Trump's life, his run for presidency. I know there are polls out there that say, 6% of Trump voters may not vote for him if he's found guilty. I don't know. I know some Trump voters. I find that hard to believe. Even 6% would be swayed based on the verdict of this specific trial, because really people already knew this happened. There's not a denial that he paid her hush money. You know, I don't know if you're into the intricacies in the trial. And you asked me initially, so there's that answer. And then in terms of whether he'd be found guilty or not guilty, dude, we've been doing this show for a while. I know this is the reboot of the show, but I think Trump wins. Whether he loses, he still wins, because the media, it's about him all the time. So I think it's likely he'll be found not guilty, just because.
Really?
And my reasoning for that is nothing more than because you're relying on Michael Cohen, and I don't know if I had to wager. In Succession, when Michael McFadyen is talking to who's the oldest son on Succession?
Kendall.
Kendall. He's talking to
Kendall?
Kendall, and he says, in all the years I've known him, like, he never gets fucked, and you get fucked all the time.
Yes.
Like, that's how I
Yes.
feel about Trump. Like, you want to go with Cohen? I've seen Cohen get screwed. I've never
Yes.
really seen Donald Trump get screwed. So, like, if I'm going to choose a side, that's how I'm basing my decision, sir. And what of you? What do you think about all of that?
Well, Stormy Daniels would beg to differ that Trump has never been screwed. I would say that
That was a groaner, dude.
I know it was it
It
wasn't
wasn't
good.
terrible, but it wasn't good.
That was pretty bad. Yeah, it was like a 3 out of 10. I will say that I think he will be found guilty most likely. I do think there is a chance of a hung jury, which would be a win for him. Anything short of a felony conviction is a win, because as we know, with hung juries, then they have to decide if they want to try the case again. And now you're pushing things past the election, which is his strategy with all of these cases anyway. So I think he will be found guilty. I think he did it. I think he is guilty, most likely. I do agree with you, though, that there is a slight question that could produce a hung jury because of the fact that Michael Cohen is the only direct link, if you followed the case, from Trump to the scheme to pay her hush money and then have that repaid without declaring it a campaign finance contribution, which is essentially the crux of the case.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of circumstantial evidence, and there's some document evidence, and there are other witnesses who kind of back up a lot of what Cohen says. And so I think there is enough there if you kind of combine what Cohen says with the documents, with the circumstantial evidence, with just kind of common sense.
Yeah,
I mean, David Pecker, a National Enquirer guy, who, by the way, part of the testimony the jury wants to hear tomorrow is his. He's the guy who doesn't dislike Trump, unlike Cohen. He doesn't hate Trump. In fact, he has nothing but nice things to say about Trump. And he says that he and Cohen and Trump meant to talk about catch and kill of stories in 2016, specifically with Karen McDougal. And then you had the Access Hollywood tape. And then that set off panic within the Trump campaign. Then you had Stormy Daniels trying to get as much money as she could at that point, right before the election. So it makes sense. And then you have the documents with Alan Weisselberg, Trump's finance guy, writing the amount of money, $130,000, multiplying it by 2 for taxes, adding in another charge. So when you put it all together, I think the circumstantial evidence is pretty strong. And I think he probably will be convicted. Does it matter? It matters for history's sake. I mean, yes, I think it does matter. But I don't think this case will sway many, if any, voters. I think when you ask the polling question, not you specifically, you, the plural you, the royal you, when polling companies ask the question, will you still vote for Trump if he is a convicted felon? He's consistently scored poorly. Like even in polls where he was beating Biden, when you ask that question, he would often lose. But I think when people thought about the felony he would be convicted of, they weren't thinking of this case. And that's really the great win for Trump in all of this is of the 4 criminal cases he's facing, not only I think is this the weakest case, as in the one he has the best chance to not be convicted in, but it's also by far the least important. Like say what you will about concealing a hush money scheme before an election and then falsifying business records to repay that, which is what he's accused of doing. It's not as serious as trying to, I don't know, overthrow the election, right? By staying in office when you lost. And I don't think it's nearly as serious as the classified documents case where the man had boxes and boxes of documents like in his bathroom, in his bedroom, all over Mar-a-Lago, sharing it with people allegedly, and then wouldn't give it back for months and months and months, even after a subpoena. So I think it's the weakest case against him. I think it's the least important case against him. And because of the efforts of his lawyers to throw up any kind of roadblocks they can in all of these cases, and because of Judge Cannon in the documents case, who, if you've been following that at all, she looks like she is either in over her head or she's really trying to help Trump delay this. That one's probably not happening before the election. Then in Georgia, he had the stroke of luck of, 2 of the prosecutors having an affair, and then that whole fiasco of the one prosecutor having to leave, and so that case looks like it's not going to be before the election. And then the one that is the most important, that I think would actually potentially, I say potentially damage him because I don't know even if this one would, which is the federal January 6th case. That one was set to go to trial, and the Supreme Court stepped in to hear the appeal about whether and to what extent presidents have immunity from prosecution. It's expected we'll get that verdict or that ruling in June. So it is still possible that case happens before the fall, but some people think the Supreme Court will actually just kick it down to the lower court. If that happens, then that probably pushes that case past the election. So it very well could be that this is it, that of the 4 cases, I mean, think about one of the themes of this year to me in politics is the luck that Donald Trump has had. He has been tremendously lucky in a variety of ways, but specifically here on these cases, of the 4 cases, the only one that may go to trial before the election is the one that is the worst case and the least damaging to him politically by a mile. And that is just, some of that is his lawyers delaying things. Some of that is a stroke of luck. Some of it's how long it took to file some of these charges. But either way, the end result is it works out just about as perfectly for Trump politically as you could hope for. Yeah, even if he's convicted, which I think he will be.
And like I said, I mean, the news cycle is about him all the time. Like, he loves this man. I mean, because he knows. Like, what is the likelihood, again, even if convicted of 34 crimes, that he spends any time in jail? I can tell you, it's zero. It's zero.
Well, right, because the thing, as the judge pointed out the other day, when his lawyer said to the jury in closing arguments, you can't send Trump to jail because of the word of Michael Cohen, and the judge objected to that because, as the judge pointed out, it's my decision if he goes to jail. And from what I've read about these charges, it's a maximum of 4 years for each count.
For each count.
But because Trump doesn't have a criminal record, at least as of now, there's no guarantee he'd even be sentenced to jail, even if he was convicted.
It's not just
house arrest, probation. Plus, it takes months for sentencing.
I mean, I do have some experience in this area. The cost alone, and the calamity that it would be for any penitentiary to house this man, it would be impossible. It would be literally impossible.
Right, because the Secret Service would have to be in prison with him.
Right.
So you would have to have like half the cell block.
Dude, this is what I'm saying. I mean, I'm just applying, as I often do to these situations, I'm applying logic, right?
Right.
I'm not even saying Trump shouldn't go to jail, but I'm assuming people know this, but like, they're not going to throw him in GP. Like,
he's not going to Rikers.
No, dude. I mean, it seems like a tremendous waste of time and money. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm sure maybe you think I'm wrong. Don't you think this is a tremendous waste of time and money?
No, I don't think so. I think
because of the outcomes, because you have to weigh the outcomes. That's important. Courts are busy. They have lots of other cases to look at. They have lots of other things to do. I'm trying to apply some of my expertise here. And I'm telling you that this is, as a resource, protecting that courthouse every day, bringing Trump in every day, having the circus there every day. I mean, I haven't looked it up, but I would imagine this exceeds $10 million in taxpayer money in cost. Like,
oh, I'm sure.
But I'm just, and I'm agreeing with you that of all the charges this man faces, this is the one that we're spending this amount of money and time. Trump calls it a witch hunt. I'm not saying it's a witch hunt. I'm not saying it shouldn't go to trial. I'm not saying he didn't commit a crime. I guess, we'll find out, whatever. But I'm just saying, again, practically and logically speaking, it doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense to me when you have all these other issues because again, it's outcome based and nothing's going to happen to this man. Nothing. You're delusional if you think he has gained more than he could ever lose from this. He has gained billions of dollars worth of media coverage. Seriously.
He's gained. Well, no, you're right. And I think these indictments, when they all came down, I think essentially clinched him the Republican nomination. I mean, I think he probably would have gotten it anyway. But DeSantis had a lot of momentum early, if you recall, and was polling pretty well. And then the indictment started coming, and Trump surged ahead. Now, part of that was DeSantis never really had the juice. But back to your point. Here's what I think. I think he would. So let's say in a world he's convicted of these 34 counts, and then let's say the Supreme Court throws out his ridiculous claims of absolute immunity, and he actually has to stand trial for the most important case in trying to overthrow the election. And let's say he was convicted of that at the federal level, then I think he would go to prison. That unless he won and pardoned himself. But I think he would go to prison if he's convicted of 34 felonies. And then he's convicted in another trial, because then at that point he would no longer. So I think he would go to prison if he was convicted in multiple cases.
I know I'm being hypothetical, but don't we have to think about this on a little bit of a higher level? Like, what are we now? We're a banana republic. We're going to start attacking our political enemies and throwing them in jail, because that may not be the case. I'm not saying it is, but it's the way it looks, man. I think
it's the way it looks to some people. Here's the thing I would say. And I'm saying this is an honest hypothetical question. What makes you more of a banana republic? Is it trying an ex-president who's a political opponent who committed crimes and is found guilty and has the chance to have lawyers and make their case and appeal if they're convicted? Or is it not bringing charges because you don't want the political blowback of trying an ex-president. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Right.
Like,
but
what
I
makes
know I'm
you
not
more
directly answering your
of a
question,
banana
but
republic?
the ideal scenario would be a crime that is committed that is so egregious is that you have agreement between the Democrats and Republicans that
Yeah,
that
but
is the
that's,
case.
I mean,
No,
that's not
dude,
the world
you're
we live
asking
in.
me. I'm telling you, that's what would
Like,
make it not look like a banana republic.
if Trump pulled out an AK-47 and shot 5 people on video, he and many of his supporters would be like, well, it's justified. You can't charge him. He's the leading candidate for the Republic. I mean, think about the
Dude, the
arguments
delusion
made.
knows no bounds. I got it.
Right. I mean,
I understand that, but I'm trying to
think about
answer a hypothetical with an ideal scenario.
Right. But think about, but that's not the world we live in, right? It's like what Don Rumsfeld said about the army, you know, back in the Iraq War, you fight with the army you have. Like, this is the world reality we live in. We don't live in a country where people are rational and reasonable. I wish we did.
Which is
but we
why, I come back to the hypothetical, which is why I think I really do. I think it's a bad idea. I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to roll the dice.
This case or all 4 cases are a bad idea.
Right. No, I think the January 6th one has some merit. But again, if you're asking me if I would pursue that case, I believe it is more detrimental to the Democrats as a party to execute what's currently happening than to just not do anything. I really believe that, because what the Democrats underestimate is how much people hate, 1, the media, and 2, the government. They hate those 2 things. Your average person does not trust the media, and they do not trust the government. Trump is the perfect martyr. Dude, if he's convicted, it might be better.
In this case, it might be. I don't think that's true of the January 6th case, but I think you could be right on this one. Look, I think that the argument you're making is actually the best argument Trump has, because in all of these cases, especially the other 3, but even in this one, the argument of I didn't do it or he's innocent, you don't hear that a lot. You know what I mean? Like, in the documents case, if you follow that at all, it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
In the election subversion cases, I guess he has a free speech argument he'll try to make, but it's going to be
the documents one. That's a lot of whataboutism too, because you know,
which is
I mean, every president, and that's a little too definitive, but almost every president has had some issues with.
But not to this.
No, not to this severity.
And they weren't.
And there's nuance, and that's why I'm couching it. But you get what I'm saying,
right? But I think the argument is the best argument he has is what you made, and I have some sympathy for that argument, and that is prosecutorial discretion, particularly for Alvin Bragg in this case, where you had 34. Again, do I think he did it? Do I think he's guilty of the charges based on what I've seen of the trial? I do. I do think he's guilty. But to me, the argument is, should this case have even be brought? And I think on this one specifically, there's a very strong argument that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Yeah. These are 34 misdemeanors that only turn to felonies because of another federal crime,
which is why it's going to get appealed anyway.
Right. So and you had a statute of limitations issue. So again, did he do it? Probably. Should he be convicted? Probably. Should you have brought the case in the first place? I think it's a fair argument to say probably not. I think that's less of an argument on the other 3, because the other 3, again, are stronger cases and they are much more serious offenses. And the other thing too is, if think about the arguments, kind of the logical extensions of the argument you're making, particularly as it relates to the cases that try to overturn the election. When he was impeached back after January 6th, many people made the argument, and I remember Mitch McConnell saying this on the Senate floor, people who didn't like what he did, but who voted to acquit him, they were like, well, the legal system can deal with it, right? If he committed crimes, the legal system can deal with it.
Mitch McConnell is about as reliable as Michael Cohen, but go ahead.
But my point is, that was an argument that was made not just by Mitch McConnell, but by his lawyers defending him.
Of course.
On the Senate floor. But so now people make literally the complete opposite argument. Now the argument his lawyers made before the Supreme Court is, you can't prosecute him because of what he did in office
because it's unprecedented, Eric. Because this has never happened before. We don't know.
But think about the circular logic of how ludicrous that is. You're
Yeah,
arguing you can't convict him of an impeachment because he can be charged in court. And then when he's charged in court later, you say, well, you can't charge him in court because he hasn't been convicted of an impeachment. It's a ridiculous.
No, it's because these people aren't idiots. It's intentional. Of course it is.
It's hypocritical, intentional. I agree with that. But my point is, if you buy that, then what you're essentially saying is there's no repercussions for trying to steal an election, which maybe you have. Maybe I'm not saying you. I'm saying maybe one has that position. Maybe that is. But think about it. If you can't be impeached and convicted because you haven't been charged, and you can't be charged because you haven't been impeached and convicted, then what you're essentially saying is there's no repercussions to stop someone who tries to steal an election.
And Eric,
there's literally nothing you can do.
Not to beat a dead horse here, but ultimately it's up to the American public. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that the greatest thing that America could say to someone who tried to overthrow the government is, we're not going to elect you back to office. But we live in a time where people want to overthrow the government.
Right.
Like, so you see what I'm saying, right? I think
that's why
reasonable people would say, all right, if we're not going to impeach him because that's what we have in our Constitution, that's what happens. If they're not impeached, then they're not charged criminally. Agreed, for your circular argument, right, that they're coming back to. But what I'm saying is, if we looked at this under the prism or the scope of reality, which seems to be a real struggle, he wouldn't be elected again. He wouldn't have a chance. But again, the time we live in, I mean, here we are, buddy.
Yeah, here we are. I think that my preference would have been this was handled in the political process. What I've always said about not just January 6th, because I think we make it too much about that day and those events, but the whole period of trying to overthrow the election from election day through January 6th, his conduct there was, in my opinion, first and foremost, a political crime. It was a dereliction of duty. It was a high crime and misdemeanor, I think, by trying to overthrow an election or overturn an election you lost. And it should have been handled by the impeachment process. And it's a damn shame that we live in such a time where we're so polarized that I think seven Republicans did vote to convict him and every Democrat, but it wasn't quite enough because you need 2/3. So I would have felt more comfortable with that than I do with criminal charges, although I'm open to the criminal charges too, because as I said before, if you don't think you can be charged criminally and you don't think you can be impeached and convicted, then what you're essentially saying is a president can do pretty much anything, I guess, short of, I mean, I hope people, if Trump literally had led an army, if he had tried to
if it would have been a military
bring in the National Guard,
right,
then maybe not. Maybe people would have still defended that. I don't know. But essentially what you're saying is, short of that, you can do anything. And I think that's a very dangerous thing because, look, our country, you're right, is based on, first and foremost, people making the right decisions. Absolutely. That is true. But we also have protections in our Constitution and in our law that don't care what the majority thinks. That's why we have them, right? It doesn't matter what the majority thinks about free speech or gun rights or any other issue. It doesn't matter what they think about the law. Those things are there to kind of protect us in part from the majority, even if the majority wants to do crazy shit. So that's what I'm saying with the logic where you can kind of talk yourself into and twist yourself into a pretzel trying to justify all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you're saying, again, not you specifically, people are saying then, well, the people have to vote him out and that's all we got. And maybe you're right? At the end of the day, I hope that is true. But if they don't, then literally nothing else can be done because Trump didn't succeed and hopefully will never succeed in some of the things he tried to do. But what if the next person does? What if something like this comes up again?
Well, not to transition. I think that's an excellent question to ask, which is, I think Trump is such a political anomaly. I mean, many are going to attempt to recreate what he's done, and for good reason. He's been very successful. That's certainly a good enough reason to repeat it. But to have the chutzpah of Mr. Trump and, have the unmitigated gall to have no shame, I guess is what
Mhm.
I'm really driving at. To have absolutely no shame. I, I think, like I said, I believe he's a little bit of a political anomaly, man. It's really going to be hard to manufacture that guy in the lab because you see people trying to do it now, and it's kind of funny, when you
Yeah.
see some people, trying to, be like Mike. I don't know. I just think I think Trump just. I don't think you can make him, dude. I don't think you can make another one like him. He's a cartoon character. It's unbelievable.
It is. And what you're saying there is part of what makes me actually optimistic that fingers crossed, I think will probably be okay because despite his efforts, at the end of the day, our institutions held.
Yeah.
Like they were stressed, they were tested, but we held. And we have done something since then to try to strengthen those. They changed the format of how you challenge electoral college votes, raising the threshold,
They're
clarifying
cutting
the
off
vice.
mics at debates now.
Right. Well, right. Clarifying there's no role for the vice president. So I think also people look, I mean, what happened with January 6th? You had 1,200 people that have gone to prison. I think that makes it less likely that you will see something like that in the future with people know there might be real consequences. But the other thing too is to your point, I think there is something that is kind of singular about Donald Trump, that he has that combination of the being able to appeal to people, but as you said, having that complete and utter lack of shame to try anything. And there just really isn't. And look, somebody may come along or somebody now may morph into that who's already on the scene, but I just don't see another person like that, in the offing. And hopefully that remains the case because I think you're right. Some of it is our polarization, but a lot of it is just him. It's the singular kind of force that he
Yeah.
is, for better or worse.
Yeah,
But
and
the
I want to
one
be clear. I'm not denying it. I'm giving the man credit. Like I really am. For people don't think Donald Trump is a great communicator. I disagree. He's an excellent communicator to the people that he needs to communicate to. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, whatever it is, it works.
my last point on this is the thing that weighs against my optimism. The only thing that makes me pessimistic with a post-Trump world is part of the reason his appeal has worked so much isn't just him. It's because the void he stepped into, where we live in this incredibly polarized world, certainly the most polarized politically of my
Yeah, that's Rush
lifetime.
Limbaugh's fault.
Well, as he played a role, but I think I mean, like I would say certainly in my lifetime, you could argue going back to the Civil War, but we live in this world where everything is so black and white. Politics has become about tribe, about team. We live in these media silos where people get their information only from certain sources. They don't even, so we can't even really talk to each other because we're dealing with different facts. And that is getting worse and worse and worse
How do you
with
handle that
algorithms and the internet.
in life? Because, dude, I don't talk about politics to anybody. Honestly, man, when I go to social gatherings, people will occasionally bring things up. I was playing poker the other day. Someone brought it up, and I do, dude. I treat politics like protesters. Do not engage under any circumstances because the outcome can only be violence. And I don't care to try and change anyone's mind. I don't want to change anyone's mind. If someone directly asks me what I think about something, I tell them I don't watch the news because I just don't want to deal with it.
I understand that. I don't seek it out, but I also don't shy away from it. Part of it is, this is what I love, and my other podcast, another plug, Everybody Settle Down. That's all we talk about is politics. So I love to do that and get into it a little bit, but there are certain people you just kind of know this isn't going to go anywhere, and so
Right. No,
because
dude, I like to wind people up. Let's be clear about that. Don't get me wrong. I've been known to light a fire and slowly walk away, but that's at least 6 beers in before that happens.
All right, let's switch gears, talk a little sports. Major League Baseball. This is kind of interesting. The MLB has incorporated the statistics of the various Negro leagues into the record book. So these are leagues that took place in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s before African Americans were allowed to play Major League Baseball. And most people agree, and I think some of the games, the exhibitions at the time bear this out, that the players in the Negro Leagues, many of them were as good or better even in some cases than major leaguers. And a lot of the top players would have had incredible careers in the major leagues. But of course, they didn't have the chance because of the rampant discrimination at the time. Anyway, Major League Baseball, after a long study and lots of research, has now incorporated the Negro League statistics into the Major League Baseball record books, which means that many records now have changed. Many career records, many individual season records. Josh Gibson, who played in the Negro Leagues, is now MLB's career batting leader at 372, surpassing Ty Cobb's 367. Gibson hit 466 for the 1943 Homestead Grays. That's now the record for the highest in a season. He's also now the career leader in slugging percentage and OPS, moving ahead of the great Babe Ruth. A bunch of other records have changed as well. I read about this today, and what's interesting to me is, first of all, I love that they're trying to incorporate the Negro Leagues into the fold here, because obviously these players, through no fault of their own, were not allowed to play Major League Baseball. And clearly Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, some of these guys would have been stars in Major League Baseball. So I appreciate the effort. But the one thing that causes me a little bit of concern is how bad the record keeping was for many of these leagues. And the committee that went through this has kind of talked about it. So they estimate that they only have 70% of Negro League records from 1920 to 1948. And they need to go back and try to figure this out. There's some games where they have part of the stats, but not the others. So look, it's a little bit scattershot, but I understand it and I do appreciate the effort.
Yeah. So, for our audience, I'm a little bit of a baseball celebrity, let's say, but only on Facebook. Because I do a lot of sports memorabilia training. I've built up my whatever. So I did put out an official statement on this, Eric.
Oh, you did?
So
I'm anxious to hear this.
My official statement is, I don't think this takes anything away from the achievements of players who played in non-integrated games. If anything, it helps further recognize the players in the Negro Leagues. There's no reason, or at least I haven't seen one, to suggest that Negro League players were far lesser than their white contemporaries. Many African Americans and some Latin players came into the league immediately and were all-stars or impact players. Don't quote me on this, but the database is not 100% complete, which is something you said. And just know that some of the numbers might change. And believe it or not, that's not unheard of. And the example I gave was Hack Wilson's RBI record. After many, many years, they went back. Hack Wilson had always had 190 RBIs, which is the all-time record. And they found out through scorekeeping that he actually had 191 RBIs. So these things do change over time. That was my official statement on the topic. I was trying to be brief. I do think there's a lot to discuss here, but that's my overall sentiment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, it's a worthy thing they did, and we should recognize those leagues. And I'm all for incorporating them in if they can find them. I just want to make sure, we have accurate numbers. At the end of the day, does it really matter? I mean, we know Babe Ruth is a great player. We know Josh Gibson was a great player. Does it matter which one had a higher career OPS? I guess
it does to some people, dude. I'm telling you,
to hardcore baseball fans,
like, it is all the rage in these rooms that I'm in. Some of my favorites have been, some random basement dweller on Twitter said, if you don't like them incorporating the Negro League stats, then you're a racist.
Oh,
and of course, that gets posted and then everyone reacts to it. Dude, we are stupid. Like, it would be one thing if like Tim Kirkchin got on there and said it, but it's just some anonymous person on Twitter. Who cares? Like, but it's doing what we do in politics or anything else. It's stoking the flames that are already there, and it's people gaslighting, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, I largely agree with you. I don't think this hurts anybody. I also, no. I don't think it takes away from the achievements of players in either league. I mean, the truth is, when we were kids, I didn't know a lot about the Negro Leagues. because that's not what
No.
we saw. That's not what we were exposed to. Everyone knew who the Pittsburgh Pirates were, but who had heard of the Monarchs or the Grays? Like, I didn't know that these were things. That only came to pass probably when I got older. And, the advent of the internet is really what helped me learn about these Latin leagues and Japanese leagues and everything else, the Sadaharu O's, et cetera, et cetera. The other argument I've seen made is that this opens up the floodgates, and then all of a sudden they're going to incorporate like Japanese record. Like, it somehow opened Pandora's box. Like, no, these were games played in America.
Right. And also, not only that, but you probably know about this more than I do, but there were exhibitions, many contemporary exhibitions from that time. And the Negro League All-Stars often did very well when they toured and played against Major League All-Stars.
That's true.
Of that era.
But those stats will not count.
No,
I mean,
right,
just
but,
to be
right.
clear.
Yes, but the point I'm making is it wasn't as if it was a far inferior league. Because I think you could make the argument if every time they played those All-Star games, if the National and American League teams won 11-1 or 12-2, then I think you could argue, well, they were really playing an inferior league. It's not really apples to apples. But because the Negro League players fared so well, I think that gives it the credence to say, hey, they were, at least the elite players were as good as many of the elite players in Major
Why
League
do you
Baseball.
think there was integration in baseball?
Right. Because they were so good.
Because they were good and people wanted to win
their way through.
Right. It had nothing to do with the civil rights movement or anything else. What it had to do with was people being competitive and saying, you know what? You know who's really that Willie Mays kid? I bet you if we put him in a uniform and we put him on our squad, I bet we'd be better. That's also what happened.
For the people who really hate on this, here's the thing too. Babe Ruth wouldn't have been as good as he was if he had faced the elite African-American pitching in the day. Now, he still would have been great. Don't get me wrong, right? A lot of pitchers from that era would not have had the numbers they had if they had to face Josh Gibson, 20, 30 times a year. My point is they benefited major leaguers from their statistics, at least, from not having the integration for so long. In a way,
that went both ways.
Inflated their numbers, right? But it also,
dude, this. I'm just sorry to interrupt you. It just makes me so uncomfortable. That hypothetical, like, fine, I can be uncomfortable, but the reason that I really don't love it is because I feel like I'm talking about college football and who's number one right now, and like we're talking about human beings. So it's a weird. I'm just saying. I know this isn't therapy. I'm telling you how I feel. Like I don't love it because we don't know if Josh Gibson had played in integrated baseball. It's the same argument. He certainly would not have batted 461 like that. I don't think not have happened. I'm certain of it. Babe Ruth probably would have had 52 home runs instead of 61. Like, okay, but he still would have been Babe Ruth, and Josh Gibson still would have been Josh Gibson. Right.
I agree.
That's all I'm saying.
It is, but you're right. It is an interesting debate. So in your circles, because you're, as you mentioned, you're kind of into this world of memorabilia and arguments about these kind of things. Where do you think what's the percentage of people do you think that support this versus think it's a bad idea?
I'll sum it up like this. The vast majority of baseball fans are white and over 60. Deduce what you will from there.
I think I know where you're going with that. Okay. Enough said. All right, Brian, world of entertainment, movies, TV shows the last couple of weeks. What have you seen? What has caught your attention? Do you have any reviews for us today?
Were you a fan of Dune when we were kids? Did you read any of the novels, any of the books? Did you watch the movie in the 80s?
I had no idea what Dune was until the first movie came out, the recent Dune movie. What was that have been, like 3 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yes. And I've actually, this is how far behind I am in Dune. So I saw that first one. The second one, I'm about halfway through.
Oh my God.
On Max right now. I just started watching it. So
really
that is my
time.
Yeah, I'm not a huge, and I love sci-fi. I'm not a huge Dune fan, although I do think it is pretty impressive world building, and it is interesting.
Well, we talked about this the last time we got together, so I won't beat it into the ground, but I feel like Dune would be much better as a television series. I know the production would be out of this world, no pun intended, but I don't know that it could. I tried to watch it with Trisha. That did not work. She could not have possibly cared any less about anything, even with Mr. Chalamet and his beautiful eyes. Just wasn't enough to keep her interested. Personally, I enjoyed the heck out.
Now,
I
what are you talking
really
about? Are you
liked it.
talking about the first movie or Dune 2?
I like the second one better than the first
Okay.
because
So
the first
far, I would
was a lot of
agree.
setup, but it's not that it wasn't great. It's like, you know how it is. It's like you gotta set things up. Who is this? Who are these guys? Where does this person come
Right.
from? They got to get the whole thing together. Where Dune 2, that's already been established, so they have a little bit more latitude. Christopher Walken as the Emperor, fantastic choice there.
Yes.
Love him and
I
everything.
I would say that so far in my 1.5, and I will soon watch the end of part 2. I respect it more than love it. I would say is how
Mm.
I view it. Don't get me wrong, it's fine. It's just not something that really grabs me. I think it's just a little too sci-fi, and also I just think that it's, as you said, it would be better as a series. It's so dense and there's so much going on.
The one thing that
It's a
stands
lot
out
to
to
pick
me
up.
is how the music punches you in the face. It's like Wonder Woman. Ah, like every time
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, ah, in Dune, I swear that's like 2/3 of the movie. This just
Yeah.
overarching, like angel music is just beating me over the head. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, as films, and again, I'm halfway through the second, so take that for what it's worth. I just think a little bit of subtlety could have helped them. Just a little bit of subtlety in the writing, in the score, in the direction. Not everything needed to be over the top.
Right.
I felt like didn't have enough of those moments that were a little more deep, a little more
The
substance.
other thing I started was I had never watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I had
I've
never
never seen it.
I've
Is
never
it
seen the
good?
show. I just watched the first season, and I got to tell you, the humor is right up my alley. Especially as a former police officer, I like what they've done. It basically okay. Let me sum up Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's the office at a police department. I mean, that's what it really is.
And it's who's the lead actor now? I don't even remember.
Andy Sandberg.
Yes. And where can we? What service is that on? What
It's
streaming
on the
service?
Netflix.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So I finished Ripley. I think I talked about
Yeah, you
that
did.
whenever we did our last show. I had only seen at that point the first 3 episodes. I have finished it now. It's stuck the landing. 9 out of 10 on Ripley. This is the best show since Succession that I've seen. It
That's
is
high praise.
fantastic. It is so well done. I just am in awe of I think the word I used on the last time when I talked about the craftsmanship. I'm just in awe of the way that it's shot. It is the opposite of Dude. It in every way. It's a subdued score. It's quiet. There are moments of silence. There's not a ton of there are no special effects. It's about nuance and dialogue and directing, and everything is pitch perfect. Some people may not like it because the show takes its time to a degree that is almost in certain scenes too much.
Like
There are
Better Call
scenes that
Saul, slow burn.
take, I mean, so it's based on the book and then The Talented Mr. Ripley, which was made into a movie in 1999 with Matt Damon, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Gwyneth Paltrow. So this is that story, but over 8 episodes where they really have time to give you all the details. And this is a detail show. And I love it. I loved it. It just sucks you in, and it's film noir style. Now it's in black and white. As I said, it's paced kind of slow. The show's set mostly in Italy, so there's a lot of Italian dialogue with subtitles. So these things may not appeal to everybody. I get
Dune
it.
made $1 billion.
Right. I'm not saying it's for everyone, but if you love just an incredibly well-crafted, like, show about murder and detective work and just psychological manipulation and those things, this is just almost perfect. I
Do
give it a
you
9 out of 10. It's
do you
so well
select
done.
your watching based on your mood? because you know what I mean? Because sometimes,
Yeah.
like for me, like a lot of television and a lot of entertainment is because I don't have to think at all. I get on my couch, Trisha leans over and lays on me, and I just sit there, everything shuts down, and I take in whatever it gives me without a lot of thought. Yeah, and a lot of those movies are tremendously successful. They don't really leave an impression on me one way or another. And then there are some times where, like you're talking about this Mr. Ripley, it sounds like everyone better hush. We got to put the dog in the kennel because I gotta see what's going on here. I can't miss anything.
Well, right. There is a lot of detail, but that's what I like about it is it goes into the nuance of how the crimes are committed. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but
there
that's
are
the
murders
joy of
in this
the
show.
joy of the show. I'm
Right.
sure that's what I'm saying. You gotta be aware of those things. So, is this like a mood for you where you selected it, or like do you just go into things blind and you're like, I just want to see
No.
what I feel?
So here's the thing. Where I am in my life right now, I don't, and in terms of like free time and being able to, and this is mainly involves my child, being able to sit down for periods of time uninterrupted is limited.
Well, this is why you're halfway through Dune, by the way.
Yes.
Because you
So
don't have 3 hours to just set aside, strip down your underwear, grab a beer, and take in Dune.
So when I was younger, I'll contrast it to when I was younger and childless and
Oh, I remember
directionless in life. I watched everything. I went to the movies all the time. Anything that came on a video, comedy, drama,
Blockbuster
didn't
video.
matter. Yes, and the era. Now I'm like the complete opposite. I want it curated for me. So I will not watch pretty much anything until I at least. And there are a couple of critics that I trust. I will often check Rotten Tomatoes. I'm one of those people. So I now have learned what I like. And one of the reasons that most of the shows I review on here get high ratings is I have a pretty good idea going in. I'm probably going to like it. And I won't finish things. If I watch 1 or 2 episodes and I'm wrong and I think it's trash, I just won't finish it. So I very rarely will watch. I very rarely will watch.
Once I'm in, like I feel like I gotta do it. I gotta see this through. But this is why, like, my son Oliver was like, "Hey, do you want to go see the Garfield movie?" I was like, "I love Garfield, dude. Just shut the brain off. Go in there. Big cat with lasagna. I'm great."
I just don't watch movies like that or TV shows like that for the most part. It's got to be something that gets my gears fired at this point in my life, or I just don't care. It's not even so. Part of it is time. Part of it is I don't care that much to see things that I think are trash or that I watch and I believe to be trash.
Well, what made you watch Dune then? Because it got good reviews. Is that why?
Oh, Dune. Well, part of it is, again, as I said, I love sci-fi. I'm representing my Star Wars shirt. Like, for instance, Star Wars is a great example. A lot of what Disney Plus has done is trash of Star Wars, but I will still watch that. That is like one exception.
That's your exception.
So that's my
I want to be clear. You're willing to make exceptions because you're invested. Of course.
Absolutely.
Dude, it's like me with Marvel movies. I've seen them all.
But see,
like, sir, there must be a lot of people who just decided, like, I'm out on stuff. Dude, I saw Captain Marvel, the second one, at the theater. Like,
yeah, see, I bailed on Marvel. That's a great example. When the quality was high, I was in on Marvel. When I felt like the quality had tailed off, I'm like, well, I'm out. There's too many other things.
Have you seen Loki?
Loki's the again, we talk about exceptions. Loki's the exception.
You've seen both
really
seasons?
Enjoyed Loki. I did. It wasn't great. It was not a great show, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I guess I'm grading on a Marvel curve.
Right. I would not give it a 9 out of 10 like I did.
No, I mean, anyway, it's clearly not Citizen Kane. I'm just saying, like, it was pretty good.
Check out Ripley if you love those kind of movies. It's set in like, and the other thing too, I think that's interesting is there's something about crime shows that are set in an earlier period that I think often make them better because you take out the cell phones and the technology. And that's like this show's set in the early 60s in Italy. And so there's so many, you could never do this show today. Certainly not in this way, because so much of it is about how you were able to get away with things before the technology we have now with Googling everything and cameras everywhere and phones everywhere. So that I think really adds to it.
Did you see Perry Mason with Matthew Reese?
No, I've not. I've heard good things.
Yeah, if you like what you just described, and obviously you wouldn't have said it if you didn't, but I would highly recommend Perry Mason. Both seasons of that have been really good.
All right. Anything else before we get going? I did want to talk about Star Wars, the accolade. Speaking of Star Wars, but let's talk about that and Marvel.
No,
Next
we
week.
can do that, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
let's do a status
I don't
check.
have Star Wars energy. You get too
And
excited.
I don't have Marvel energy, so this is good because we need an
We'll
update
feed
on
off
both
of each
these
other then.
franchises. Absolutely.
I can take a nap as you talk about Star Wars, and you can nap when I start talking about Marvel.
But,
I think that's a good plan.
So in my Venn diagram though of like Star Wars and extremely high quality, there is one thing that fits there, and that is Andor.
Dude, I knew it was Andor before you said it.
I mean, Andor is fan-fucking-tastic.
It was really good.
It's
the first season
good.
of Boba Fett was pretty good.
It was okay, but Andor was like to me a Succession level like quality show. In addition to being a Star Wars sci-fi, it's funny. Like Succession is now my gold standard, like modern TV. So that's what I'm.
I want to say that that's fair. Would you give that a 10 out of 10?
I think I would, and I very rarely give. Like I
know there's a lot of niners. I've heard a lot of nines from you over the years.
So
B9, a lot of nines in films, all kinds of nines. Right. Very rarely a 10.
It's just a 10 to me. It's like if you're talking about movies, it would be like, or shows, it'd be like The Sopranos, I guess. No, I don't even think that.
I don't think Sopranos is a 10.
I think Sopranos, Breaking Bad,
The Wire.
Those may be my only. Succession. That might be the list.
Wow.
That might be the list of.
Wow. There's very few. These are gems. I mean, a 10 from you is a high rating.
And so Succession like has the belt as like the best current, show of recent years. So I don't think Ripley's a limited series, although it just tells that one story. Although they are talking about doing, because there were other books written about the Tom Ripley character. And Andrew Scott,
what streaming service is that on, buddy?
It's on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
You have to. You have.
I got lots of time in the car. I'll check it out.
So good. Well, please don't watch it while you're driving.
Obviously.
Is this a self-driving car? You have Tesla autopilot or what? What are you doing?
It's on auto.
God, that was creepy. I drove by a car. I don't know if they have these where you are. The other day I drove by my first, I think it's Wayvo is the company that didn't have a driver or anybody in the front seat that, they take passengers. And it was so weird pulling up beside a car.
Dude, you're in California. It's fine. If that happened here, 911 would be flooded.
It is so weird. Pulling up beside a car that is not it's stopped at a red light, but it's like not parked. It is literally in the flow of traffic, stopped at a red light, and you look over and there is not a human being to be seen.
Yeah, I trust that about as much as many people trust the government, which is to say not at all.
So you will not be riding one of those?
No, dude. Just the psychological fear of not being in control. Dude, I'd have a panic attack. I would 100%. I would have a panic attack.
Well, when you come out here, we should try one. I just want to see if you
all right. It. I mean, I'll try anything once. What the hell?
Yeah. Well, we know that. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Any final thoughts, Brian? I always like to give you a chance.
I appreciate that. I'm good.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. Make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. We hope you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.